My entitled step-siblings tried to drown me, vandalized my cabin, and got arrested.
You know the saying, blood is thicker than water? Well, my family tested that theory, literally. When my half-brother's kids tried to shove me into a pond, I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. It escalated from a childish prank to a full-blown criminal rampage. They betrayed my trust, stole my income, and when I put my foot down on the mountain cabin I bought for my parents, they decided to break in with a torch. This isn't just a story about toxic relatives. It's about how I drew the final line and watched them discover the real cost of entitlement, a cost that landed them with an attorney bill, thousands in damages, and a night in jail. Stay tuned because the final settlement twist is what truly breaks this family.
Am I the fool for stepping aside when my half-brother's kids tried to shove me into an ornamental pond, leading to a spontaneous hydro-baptism? This all unfolded this past weekend. My step-parents, Lauren and Marlon, chose to host a lakeside cookout. I initially declined because I genuinely don't enjoy spending time with my step-siblings, Spencer and Vivian, their partners, or their children. My partner, Audrey, and I are happily kid-free. Lauren then heavily pressured Audrey. Long story short, we went. By the time we arrived, there were roughly 15 people there. My step-siblings and their spouses were already quite cheerful, or rather, heavily intoxicated. Lauren was spending all her time attempting to supervise the grandnieces and nephews, whose ages ranged from approximately 6 to 10. Marlon had wisely retreated to the dock, fishing with a small cooler of imported stout. Audrey and I exchanged polite conversation with various guests, enjoyed some grilled food, and had a chilled cider. Spencer and Vivian took turns criticizing us for our late arrival, our casual clothing, we weren't in swim trunks, and for ruining the chill vibe. Typical lakeside weekend gathering nonsense. About 30 minutes into our stay, two of the younger children charged at one of the extended family friends who was standing near the ornamental pond's edge and succeeded in pushing her. The friend stumbled but didn't completely fall in, so she was only soaked up to her waist. She was clearly very displeased, but she didn't cause a scene. She simply went over to the parents, retrieved a towel, dried off, and swiftly departed. My step-siblings and their partners found the whole thing hilarious. A little while later, I was standing a few feet from the pond, speaking with an older cousin. I noticed 3 of the kids sprinting full speed toward me out of my peripheral vision. It was clear I was their next target. While it's not hard to outmaneuver young children, I simply sidestepped their charge at the very last second. All 3 kids ran directly into the pond at full tilt, completely submerged for a moment. Most of the other guests, including Audrey and me, burst into laughter. However, their mothers, Spencer and Vivian's wives, who were quite pickled, absolutely panicked. Apparently 2 of the kids couldn't swim, even though they were wearing their swim gear. Since I was not in any swimming attire, I took a step back from the water and allowed other guests to assist in pulling the children out. The kids were wailing like they'd suffered a grave injury. At that moment, utter chaos erupted. The 4 soused parents began screaming at everyone, generally, and at me specifically. They accused me of nearly letting their children drown and were furious because 2 of the kids had been filming the stunt using their parents' premium cell phones, which were now at the bottom of the murky pond. One of the brother-in-laws, Clark, got into the pond to attempt to recover the phones, but his physical bulk and high blood alcohol content made the task impossible. No one else offered to help, which was unsurprising, given that my stepsisters were still loudly complaining to every person present. I firmly told them it was their responsibility to watch their kids. I stated that if any actual harm had come to the children, it would have been solely their fault, not mine. Strong words were exchanged on both sides. Audrey and I left immediately after the other brother-in-law, Spencer, tripped and fell, face-planting onto the gravel path while shouting insults at us.
Now they are claiming I should have just let the little delinquents push me in, allowed them to have their fun, and ruined my own property in the process. Was I wrong? First off, Lauren and Marlon informed me that all my grandnieces and nephews are perfectly capable swimmers and use the lake regularly. The 6-year-old is still learning, but he loves the water. My stepsisters had lied, saying the kids couldn't swim just to make me look malicious. To be fair, none of the children are permitted in the deep section of the pond, which is exactly where they ended up. It was the 9-year-old and the 2 8-year-olds who tried to push me. After Audrey and I departed, the gathering ended on a bitter note. The plastered brother-in-law who face-planted had to be taken to an urgent care clinic to have his face stitched up. He was too drunk to drive, so Marlon had to take him, which he was very unhappy about. Late that evening, one of my stepsisters, Vivian, started a group chat saying some truly vile things. Their spouses joined in with a few comments as well. Audrey and I blocked all 4 of them. Lauren called me, extremely distressed about what they had written. She and Marlon were in the chat. Because of the hateful texts, my step-parents insisted Spencer and Vivian and their spouses come over the next day, Sunday, without the children, to sort things out and establish new boundaries, as Lauren put it. The result was a seemingly reluctant apology from the siblings, relayed through Lauren's phone. I'm thankful Audrey was with me when they called. Her intense gaze prevented me from saying what I was truly thinking. I simply told them, thanks, and that we felt no need to discuss it further. Believing the issue was resolved, I unblocked them that night. I immediately received a text from one of the brother-in-laws, Clark, stating the phones cost $1,500 and asking when I would be sending the payment. I replied, never. I screenshotted his text and forwarded it to Lauren and Marlon with a note that we were completely finished with this ridiculousness. We declared we were going no contact with my step-siblings and their partners and would not attend any future holidays or events if they were present. I then blocked them all again. At that point, the real trouble began. Marlon called them and gave them an earful. Among other things, he informed them the grandkids were not welcome at his house indefinitely. Since Lauren frequently provides free childcare, this news truly rattled them. Marlon also informed them that they were banned from using the mountain cabin and revealed that Audrey and I actually own it, not him and Lauren. This revelation completely shocked them. Both step-siblings' families use the cabin frequently, even hosting friends for weekend trips. This was completely out of character for my step-parents. They were clearly at their breaking point. For reference, I never wanted my step-siblings to know we owned the place. We bought it for Lauren and Marlon, who had always dreamed of a place in the Highlands. Keeping the ownership quiet was simply a way to avoid drama. A few days later, my step-siblings and their spouses showed up at our apartment unannounced to apologize in person. We were out to dinner. They left a handwritten note. One stepsister, Vivian, also called me at work, but I sent the call to voicemail. We've decided that remaining no contact is the best course for the foreseeable future and haven't communicated with them for the last 3+ weeks. Personally, I am done. They can take a running jump. It has been an eventful few days. I thought the initial chaos was bad, but that was merely a sniffle compared to what has transpired this week. For this to make sense, I need to provide some financial background. Lauren and Marlon have never been good with saving money. I've handled their financial documents for years, so I'm privy to their finances. Their main house is mortgage-free, and they have minimal debt, but they did not save much for retirement. Both receive some government benefits, Marlon has a decent fixed income, and they have a small amount of savings, but there is no hidden wealth. I bought their current vehicle for them after their retirement as a gift, so that they would have something reliable to drive. It was the first time in maybe 20 years they hadn't leased a car. My step-siblings are convinced our step-parents are loaded and will leave their entire estate to the 2 of them, since I don't need more money. Consequently, they've never prioritized saving either. It turns out my older stepsister, Vivian, and her husband, Clark, are in serious financial trouble. They have 3 children and have been living excessively for quite some time. They've maxed out all their lines of credit and are behind on their vehicle leases to the point where one is about to be seized.
Clark had previously boasted about his high salary, but it turns out to be only half of what he'd claimed. Vivian confessed all this to Lauren on Tuesday because they desperately need a loan, and also because, and this was a huge shock for Lauren and Marlon, for the last 3 years, instead of just using the mountain cabin, she has been regularly renting it out about once a month and pocketing the cash. We're talking $3,000 plus for a weekend and at least $5,000 for a week. Since she's been cut off from the cabin, she's had to cancel one group already and now is terrified they will lose everything. My other stepsister, Spencer's wife, Ingrid, knew about Vivian's rental scheme, but of course never said a word. I suspect Ingrid has done the same thing. I once drove up there to drop off a restored antique clock I'd worked on, and there was a different family there who claimed to be staying with Spencer's family and said they had just stepped out. At the time I brushed it off, thinking she might have loaned the house to friends, but I've always wondered.
I learned all this from Lauren and Marlon, who were extremely stressed about it. Lauren is more upset than Marlon. He's mainly just furious about the betrayal. I know Marlon feels betrayed and is likely embarrassed that he is not in a financial position to help his daughter out. He reiterated that, as long as it's up to him, the girls won't be setting foot in the mountain cabin anytime soon. Lauren and Marlon let me know what was happening because they figured my stepsisters would inevitably turn their full attention to pressuring me next. They were right. On Thursday, my stepsisters, Vivian and Ingrid, came to our apartment again, this time without their husbands, and waited outside the door until I got home. I had to choose between having an ugly scene in the lobby, letting them cause a public disturbance if I went in without them, or letting them inside. I let them in. I was subjected to a fabricated story from Vivian, with Ingrid backing her up regarding why I needed to immediately grant them access to the mountain cabin again. They also accused me of being a terrible brother and insisted I should plan on paying for their children's university tuition, claiming that's what true family does. I let them finish their pitch. Then I confronted them with the facts Lauren and Marlon had shared with me. Things went downhill fast from there. There was absolute denial, tearful outbursts, profanity, and screaming, you name it. My ears are still ringing 2 days later. I will not deny that I said some truly harsh and unpleasant things to them, but nothing that was not true. They finally left after about an hour. After they left, I took a long shower and lay down. When I got up, Audrey was home, and her first words were that she'd had to block more phone numbers because my stepsisters were relentlessly calling our phones from new lines. Lauren and Marlon messaged me yesterday asking me to call. I'm certain my stepsisters have given them some distorted version of the confrontation, but I'm not ready to rehash it yet. I'm usually a very energetic person, but this endless drama has completely worn me down. I only had enough energy today to drive up to the mountain cabin and install a heavy-duty padlock on the entrance gate. I am the only person with the key. I suspect this will be enough to ensure my step-siblings leave the place alone. They would probably collapse trying to walk the half-mile uphill to the house. Yet another update regarding the ongoing chaos that is my extended family. I thought it was time to share, given everything that has happened over the past 2 weeks. After my stepsister's visit to my home, Lauren and Marlon informed me they were done managing the mountain cabin. It sounded like the sisters had been intensely pressuring them to regain access. Essentially, my step-parents handed over all responsibility for the property to me and told me, it's your problem from now on. Up until then, they had kept track of who was using it and handled all routine maintenance, replacing worn-out items, etc. While I don't blame them for wanting out of the drama, I'm disappointed. The place was meant to be something for them to enjoy and use frequently. Plus, I never cared that they let my step-siblings and their families use it because I always felt that was my parents' decision, even though I technically own it. Now, Lauren and Marlon will not have access without me being involved, and that fundamentally changes the dynamic of the place. I've taken several steps to secure the property. I already mentioned padlocking the gate. It now has a heavy chain and the best lock I could find. I also did a full reset on all the door keypads and created entirely new access codes. Security cameras were installed yesterday. This is actually quite cool,
as the technician convinced me to put a high-resolution camera looking out over the entire valley. The system cost significantly more than I anticipated, but the peace of mind is worth it. The installer also put up clear signs on the property indicating that the area is monitored by video. I also installed a heavy-duty lockout on the main water shutoff and drain valve. I sincerely hope I don't lose the keys for it because if I do, removing it will be a major pain. I haven't told anyone but Audrey that the water supply is locked off and only we possess the keys. Last week, I received separate calls at my office from both husbands trying to convince me to let them use the house as they always have. Clark had gone up there with some friends for a guy's weekend, but couldn't get past the padlocked gate. He was clearly very embarrassed and angry about being locked out. He was certain he would have broken the lock if he could. During his call, he alternated between aggressive demands and playing the helpless victim. At one point, he threatened to rip that damn gate out of the ground. He also admitted they'd been renting it out to a few friends, claimed they needed the money, argued that I was ruining their side business, and even said I should refund their guests' money. I told him absolutely not. I should have recorded that conversation, but I don't know how to do that from my office phone. The other brother-in-law, Spencer, just sounded like he was being forced to call by Ingrid. He didn't put up much of a fight when I told him to never plan on using the place anymore. In any case, I told them both they cannot use the cabin and not to ask again. At this point, I am considering selling the mountain cabin. Audrey and I won't use it enough to justify keeping it, and it's not like there will be any family gatherings there anytime soon. I mentioned selling it to Lauren and Marlon, and their response was pretty much, do what you need to. I would more than double my money by selling it. The property consists of 3 connected land parcels with incredible views and is located at the end of a private road. However, I'll likely wait a while to sell. Doing it now would be an emotional reaction. My step-siblings and I are not speaking, and I have no plans to initiate contact. I don't know the status of their relationship with Lauren and Marlon, and I don't care to know right now. On the bright side, we spent an evening with Lauren and Marlon last week and went to a new restaurant, which was lovely. No one brought up any of the drama. Lauren did update us on the grandnieces and nephews. She is spending time with them at their respective homes. Sorry this update isn't full of laughs or victories. That's just life sometimes. A few people have asked for an update, so here you go. I hired a property manager named Jimmy to oversee the mountain cabin. He lives nearby, cares for his elderly parents, and manages several properties. Some are short-term rentals, and others are weekend retreats like ours. He has access to my camera feeds and conducts a physical check of the property every week or two. I think he might have the best job in the Highlands. He gets paid to drive around with his dog, stroll around the properties, and relax on people's verandas whenever he feels like it. He also has access to a camera feed from a house near the start of the private road, which takes still shots whenever a vehicle passes by. This arrangement costs $500 per month, and he handles basic maintenance and repairs on an hourly basis. He is also friendly with all the county sheriff's deputies. This arrangement has provided me with a lot of peace of mind. He even sends photos from his walks to everyone once or twice a week. I have to brag a bit about Lauren and Marlon. I got this news from them tonight at dinner. They were under intense pressure from my stepsisters to demand that I open up the mountain cabin for the upcoming Harvest Festival. Harvest Festival up there had become a significant family tradition, though not for Audrey or me. We've only attended once in 7 years. Marlon firmly refused to bother me about it because he knew I'd say no. Instead, they came up with what I believe is a fantastic plan. They announced that they would organize the Harvest Festival gathering themselves, and if everyone prepaid to split the cost, they would rent a large Airbnb in the mountains. Otherwise, they would host the gathering at their main house, or one of the stepsisters could host it. This caused an argument between the stepsisters. Ingrid was all for the Airbnb idea, but Vivian doesn't have any money. The deadline to commit to the Airbnb has passed, so it looks like the gathering will be at Lauren and Marlon's place. We won't be attending regardless. Lauren and Marlon have asked that we not sell the mountain cabin for now. They've decided they would still like to use it occasionally, but not until my stepsisters have fully accepted the new reality. And, of course, they would probably like it if everyone could gather there again in the future, but that's just not going to happen. I'd just as soon sell it and move on at this point, but I can live with keeping it if my parents use it now and then. Plus, it will likely appreciate in value even more. Audrey and I have remained strictly no contact with my stepsisters and their husbands. Both stepsisters have called from new numbers and left messages insisting that I meet with them for our parents' sake to figure out how everyone can use the family vacation home. They've called Audrey too. I'm grateful I already had the habit of not answering calls from unfamiliar numbers. I honestly don't know if they are delusional or if they genuinely believe they can bully me into giving them access again. I don't really care. Lauren and Marlon told me that Clark and Vivian are getting out of the leases for their high-end sedan and huge utility truck and are selling their boat and some other things they've never truly needed. That is going to be incredibly difficult for Vivian. She is quite the braggart and will detest being seen in something older, smaller, or cheaper. Clark's entire identity is very much connected to his truck as well. He even has a small tattoo of the truck company's logo. Frankly, that's one of the many reasons why he and I never got along. Several people have suggested that I convert the mountain cabin to a short-term rental property. I do not plan to do so, at least not anytime soon. I know it would generate significant income, but it would cause an incredible amount of family drama and stress out Lauren and Marlon, and they don't need that. It would also be a massive hassle to remove the personal belongings Lauren and Marlon have stored there, as that stuff has nowhere else to go. There would also be considerable wear and tear on the property. Even though I'd use a manager, it would still demand some of my time. It's simply not worth it to me. I wrote most of this yesterday, but decided to wait to post until I was less agitated. Waiting did not work. I'm still extremely wound up. Sorry if this is a bit rambling. So much has happened, it is hard to write coherently. Things have truly gone to pieces. I honestly and truly did not think anything like this would happen. Things had settled down, or so I believed. I hadn't seen or heard from my stepsisters in over 6 weeks. Lauren and Marlon went up to the house for a week and had a good time. Jimmy, the property manager, has been excellent. He has completed a couple of repairs I requested, and I've given him a list of ongoing tasks. He typically sends photos of local wildlife or sunsets to his clients every week, which was almost making me want to drive up there myself. On the Friday after the Harvest Festival, my brothers-in-law, Clark and Spencer, drove up to the mountain cabin. They used a handheld cutting torch to sever the chain on the driveway gate, damaging the gate frame in the process. They then tried to get in through the front door, destroying the lock set and badly gouging the door. They finally gained entry through the utility floor door and a locked internal utility room door. They also broke into the storage shed. I'm not sure why. When they eventually came out through the front door, they were met by county sheriff's deputies and Jimmy. Jimmy receives immediate notifications from the camera system when there is activity. He saw exactly what was going on and immediately called the sheriff's department. According to Jimmy, the brothers-in-law attempted to bluff their way out of it, but the deputies were not convinced. Breaking into an empty house is a very serious offense up there. It's usually people looking to steal things to sell. When the brothers-in-law were arrested, they completely lost it, shouting threats about how they were going to beat the hell out of me, etc. Not a smart thing to say in front of law enforcement officers. Jimmy in the sheriff's office tried to call Audrey and me to see what we wanted to do, but we were spending the day with her parents and had left our phones in the car so we could truly be on vacation. So they booked the brothers-in-law on all possible charges, which is exactly what I would have asked them to do anyway. The brothers-in-law called their wives from jail, who of course absolutely panicked. They called Lauren and Marlon, tried to call me, they're blocked, and tried to find a lawyer up there to arrange bail. This is not easy to do in a rural area on a holiday weekend. Vivian has zero cash and maxed out credit cards, so if they did make bail, Ingrid would have to pay for both husbands. I know they were still in jail as of Saturday afternoon. We didn't check our phones until late Friday on the drive home from my in-laws. There were a huge number of calls and messages from Lauren, Marlon, Jimmy, and the sheriff's department. Talk about ruining a perfect day. I was in such a good mood until I looked at my phone. Audrey read through the texts and listened to the voicemails, reading them out to me. By the time we arrived home, I had a general idea of what was happening. I forced my brain back into thinking mode, tried to get past my anger, and failed. I called Jimmy and got the full report on what had happened and how extensive the damage was, which resulted in even more anger. I ended Friday by calling the sheriff's department and telling them there was no misunderstanding. My brothers-in-law had absolutely no right to be on my property, and I wanted to press charges. I did not call Lauren and Marlon back. I barely slept. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call Lauren and Marlon. They were both quite shaken by it all, particularly Lauren. My stepsisters had successfully bullied them into telling me I should inform the police it was all a simple misunderstanding and that I wanted the charges dropped. I flat out refused and told them there was no way I would do that until I spoke with an attorney and was fully reimbursed for whatever it will cost to fix everything. 100%. Lauren was crying hysterically by the time we ended the call, which of course made me feel terrible. Marlon suggested it was time for a complete reset, but also agreed that he thought they needed to pay for the damage. I haven't driven up to the property yet. There's nothing I can do, and I'll probably go insane when I see the damage in person. The photos are bad enough. I'm hoping to go tomorrow or Wednesday, but my job is not one I can just leave for non-emergencies. I've left messages with 2 attorney friends asking them to recommend the right lawyers to pursue my stepsisters and brothers-in-law. I don't know exactly what legal avenues I can take, but I'm hoping to get restraining orders. I have all the text messages they've sent me that might help. I'm also seriously considering suing them for the money they made renting the place. I don't care about the cash, but it will help make them as miserable as possible. The gloves are off at this point. A couple of side notes. 1. My brothers-in-law had no idea I'd hired someone to watch the place or that there are now cameras. Lauren and Marlon knew but hadn't told them, knowing it would just give my stepsisters more reason to start drama. There are signs on the property stating it's monitored by cameras, as well as clear, no trespassing signs. 2. Audrey has completely reached her limit at this point. I don't blame her. She's been more than patient about all of this, but she snapped and wasn't shy about letting me know. She told me it's up to me how I deal with this, but she thinks they all need to be taught a very hard lesson. 3. Clark likely won't face professional repercussions at his job over this, but Spencer has a high-level government clearance, so he might. I'm hoping that possibility motivates him to pay for the damages immediately. 4. Jimmy, the caretaker, has an interesting background. I knew he was friends with some of the deputies and figured it was just because they were all local guys. I was wrong. He was a police officer in a large metropolitan city for years, was shot on duty, and afterwards decided to retire and move to where his parents had relocated. He has some PTSD from the experience. His dog is a certified service animal and is almost always with him. I know law enforcement people tend to stick together, so I suppose that's how they became his social group. I don't want to see or speak with these awful people for the rest of my life. I know this is in direct conflict with my overwhelming urge to make their lives as miserable as possible. I didn't think I'd be making another post this soon, but a lot has happened over the past 2 days. Thursday afternoon, I received a courier-delivered envelope at my office. Inside was a signed letter from both my brothers-in-law and a cashier's check for $6,000. In the letter, they offered what I must admit was a very sincere apology. Among other things, they acknowledged the break-in, admitted it was wrong, and stated the $6,000 was to cover the damage with a promise to pay more if the final cost exceeded that amount. They also promised to stay away from the mountain cabin unless Audrey and I specifically invited them. They pleaded with me to do what I could to get the charges dropped as soon as possible, as they could both lose their jobs. They agreed to a restraining order or any other measures necessary to make that happen. There was more in the letter, all conciliatory, but that is the essence of it. To say this was a profound shock would be an understatement. It was obviously a total reversal from their previous behavior. I had already made an appointment with an attorney, Mr. Ramirez, to discuss suing my brothers-in-law for the damage and to pursue a restraining order. I called him to explain what I had just received, and he agreed to meet with me at the end of the day instead of next week. He advised me not to deposit the check. We met for about 2 hours. Mr. Ramirez recommended that Audrey and I proceed with the settlement and mutual release agreement with all of them, my stepsisters and their husbands. He explained that while we would almost certainly win a lawsuit against them, it could take 2 years or more, involve significant upfront legal fees, and there was a chance we might never see the money. He also noted that we could keep the $6,000 free and clear even if we didn't let them off the hook. He is now drafting the agreement, which will include what is essentially the civil equivalent of a restraining order. It should be ready by Monday. I had already asked Jimmy, my property manager, to prepare a bid for repairing the damage. After the meeting, I asked him to provide the most accurate estimate possible as soon as he could. I received it on Friday. He estimates it will cost around $4,500 to fix everything, most of which is for the front door. On Friday, Mr. Ramirez contacted each of the brothers-in-law, explained what we were proposing, and advised them to get their own lawyers. Both of them agreed to the proposal. Spencer told him they could afford to either pay for the damages or hire a lawyer, but not both, and they figured a lawyer wouldn't make much of a difference since they had no real defense for what they did.
His main concern was whether the charges could be dropped. From what I can gather, they're willing to do anything or sign anything to make this go away. Mr. Ramirez also reached out to the district attorney's office on Friday to discuss dismissing the charges. He got the name of the prosecutor and left a message but hasn't spoken to them yet. He believes the charges might be dismissed since the brothers-in-law are paying up and they have no prior offenses, but he's not a criminal lawyer, so it's not guaranteed. He also advised me to be prepared to drive up there Monday or Tuesday to tell the prosecutor in person that I want the charges dismissed. He further recommended that Audrey and I remain completely no contact with my stepsisters and their husbands, especially over the next 6 months, and stressed the importance of strictly following the terms of the agreement for any future interactions with them. I suspect this sudden change of heart from the brothers-in-law is because they've finally realized what is truly at stake for them, what it will cost in legal fees, fines, and potentially their jobs. There's also the unlikely but possible risk of them serving up to 120 days in county jail. One of them, Spencer, as I've mentioned before, has a government security clearance that could be jeopardized. This seems like their desperate attempt to salvage their normal lives. This is not a perfect resolution to the situation, but at least it addresses the legal and financial aspects of the mess I've been dealing with for the past few months. I doubt I'll ever have a civil relationship with any of them again, and that is absolutely fine. At this point, I just want to put this behind me, move on with my life, and never speak to them again. I'm exhausted, and Audrey feels exactly the same way. On a bit of a side note, receiving the written apology was strangely a significant moment for me.
I never expected it, but it seems to matter to me more than I thought it would. The money doesn't feel particularly important right now, though I'll certainly accept it. I'm also fairly certain that Ingrid and Spencer provided the money. The cashier's check is from the credit union of the company he works for. Once everything is signed, I plan to make one final update, likely just an edit to this post. I apologize if this comes across as overly detailed. Writing these posts has genuinely helped me process everything, and the feedback I've received has been invaluable. I truly appreciate everyone's comments, insights, and support. I sincerely hope none of you ever have to deal with this kind of nonsense. Tuesday morning. I met with my attorney, Mr. Ramirez, and went over the agreement. We changed a couple of minor things, and he sent it to my stepsisters and brothers-in-law. It included a requirement that they pay my attorney's fee, about $3,500. They were not happy about that and tried to negotiate it away, but he told them they either accept it as is or there would be no deal at all. In that case, we would proceed with suing them for the money they made from renting out the place, wear and tear from their business, repair costs from their break-in, emotional distress, lost income from having to deal with this, attorney fees, and whatever else we could find. He also told me I would push hard with the DA's office to prosecute every single charge. Mr. Ramirez also informed me that everyone was very tense and formal with one another, but they managed to maintain their composure long enough to execute the settlement document. They then departed without causing any major commotion. Grant drove up to the mountain cabin early yesterday to inspect the damage and meet with the local district attorney's office. Seeing the destruction made Grant's blood boil. It was utterly senseless. He was so furious that Grant was ready to absorb the cost of repairs himself and dedicate all his energy to ruining their lives. Grant tried to calm himself by walking around, but it failed miserably. He ended up calling a good friend who stayed on the phone with him for over an hour, letting him vent. He eventually convinced him to focus on the bigger goal of putting this behind him and moving forward with his life. Honestly, Grant's still not entirely certain that is what he wants, but he settled down enough to eat something, and he felt marginally better after lunch. Grant went to the DA's office. He hadn't made an appointment, so he had to wait for a while, but he eventually met with the assistant DA handling the case. The short version is that since Grant does not wish to prosecute and Clark and Spencer have already paid for the damages, the office is willing to drop all the charges except trespassing, which will be a Class 2 misdemeanor. Clark and Spencer will have to plead guilty and pay whatever fine the magistrate sets. I was also warned that if they contest the trespassing charge or cause any further trouble, things would go very poorly for them. It helped that they did not resist arrest. If they had, none of the charges would have been dropped. I also stopped by the sheriff's office to thank them for their swift response and for everything they did, but I only spoke with a dispatcher. I also attempted to meet up with Jimmy, the property manager, but I couldn't reach him. A couple of notes. The agreement includes a strict no-contact clause. Essentially, if any of them show up where Audrey or Grant are, or vice versa, whoever arrived last has to leave. There will be no communication except through attorneys or other mutually agreed-upon third parties. They are permitted to keep whatever they earned from renting out the vacation house, my major concession, unless I face any tax consequences for which they will be responsible. We release each other from all other liabilities up through the present date. There is more to the document, but those are the primary points. Audrey and Grant will sign the agreement later today. After that, I won't be able to discuss most of these details, but I'll still be able to talk around them. I believe this will be my final update regarding all this foolishness, but I'll respond to comments if I can. As I said before, posting about all of this and reading people's thoughts and responses has been truly helpful. It's likely been key to my handling this in a relatively healthy way. So, thank you all again. I thought it would be worth an update for anyone who's interested. Unsurprisingly, my oldest stepsister, Vivian, and her husband, Clark, have filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy.
While I couldn't care less about what happens to them financially or otherwise, they've also managed to drag Lauren and Marlon into their financial mess, which I'm not happy about. At the beginning of the year, Clark's oversized, customized Pride and Joy truck was repossessed. Pretty embarrassing for him, I'm sure, since it happened at his workplace. This was their breaking point. Without the truck, they have to share a small sedan that Lauren and Marlon loaned them, and they can barely fit their 3 children in it. Financially, they are ruined. They owe at least $150,000, probably more, on high-interest credit cards. They have 0 equity in their house, and they have a couple of personal loans that I'm fairly certain they acquired under false pretenses. They have outstanding loans on their boat, 4-wheelers, and trailers. They also owe a significant amount from defaulting on the truck lease. They hadn't made any payments on their credit cards or loans in months and were behind on their house payments as well. They got out of the lease on Vivian's massive SUV late last year. They were upside down on the lease, so they had to come up with cash to get out of it. They also had to pay an attorney, the fine, and court costs for Clark's trespassing charge at the mountain cabin. On top of that, they owe my middle stepsister, Ingrid, and her husband Spencer, money for bail and their portion of the damages to the property. As I mentioned before, Lauren and Marlon have never been financial experts, but they have generally been responsible. They are retired, their home is paid off, and they live off of their fixed income and pensions. Altogether, they receive more than they spend. Minimal savings, just an emergency fund. It turns out Lauren and Marlon emptied that fund, cashed out their small retirement account, around $25,000, and gave it to Vivian. That enabled her to catch up on the home loan payment and cover the negative equity on her car lease. But now, literally every bit of savings my step-parents possessed is gone. Plus, Marlon and Lauren have been paying for their groceries for several months and continue to pay the insurance on the car they loaned Vivian. According to Marlon, Vivian pressured Lauren for weeks to get her to hand over the money. They had been working on both Lauren and Marlon simultaneously for a while, but Marlon flat out refused every time. Eventually, Lauren succumbed. She was worried that Vivian would have to move to a shabby apartment in some desolate town and that the children would be barefoot and starving. Marlon is furious about this, and to say there's significant tension between them right now is an understatement, but they will be fine. I was pretty disappointed when Lauren and Marlon told me all this, but I wasn't surprised. It sucks that they emptied out their savings to help, but I kind of understand it. The way the bankruptcy laws work in my state, by getting caught up on the home loan, Vivian should be able to keep the house. I tried very hard not to vocalize how I felt about this and my stepsister. Honestly, I'm way more ticked off about this than I should be. The worst part for me is that Vivian and Clark could now contact Audrey and me without any real fear of repercussions. The only penalty the no contact agreement has is that if they violate it, I can sue them for the money they made from renting out the vacation house and related damages. Since they filed for bankruptcy, that claim is now essentially meaningless for them. I'm hoping they'll leave me alone, but who knows?
Lauren and Marlon also told me that Ingrid and Spencer have hit a rough patch, and that Spencer is not currently living with her and the kids. Just a guess, but I imagine he's had enough of the toxic family dynamic that caused this entire mess. Peaceful cabin and a financial showdown. Not directly related, but on a brighter note, I've spent 2 weekends at the mountain house since the start of the year, once with Audrey and once alone. Both times there was a lot of snow. It was incredibly beautiful and relaxing, very therapeutic. The place also has reliable internet service now, which is a welcome addition. Plus, knowing that I can count on Jimmy, the property manager, to keep the place in shape and ready for me to visit and to help if I get snowed in, eliminates most of the stress of owning it. Lauren and Marlon have used it a few times as well and get along great with Jimmy. There have been a fair number of requests for an update, and considering it's approaching the 1-year anniversary of the pond incident, I thought I'd post one. Lauren and Marlon eventually worked through Lauren giving Vivian her retirement account and their emergency fund. Altogether, she gave her $45,000 according to Marlon. Once Lauren realized how severely she'd been manipulated, she became as angry and upset as Marlon had ever seen her. I think she had a moment of clarity. She and Marlon ended up calling my stepsisters on a 3-way call, and according to Marlon, it went south very quickly. The sisters were using manipulative language and gaslighting them. Lauren lost her temper and ended up ripping into them hard. There were many tears, and eventually both stepsisters hung up. Lauren's core desire was just for both stepsisters to acknowledge that they'd put her and Marlon in a perilous financial situation. A typical family blow-up, I suppose, but not the kind of thing that usually happens in my family. The next morning, Marlon called Vivian and informed her he would be picking up the car they loaned her. She tried to argue, but he told her it was not open for discussion. He got a neighbor friend to take him to her house as soon as he hung up and drove the car home without speaking to her. Vivian called and yelled at him, saying lots of cruel things, which of course hurt him. But at least they have the car back.
While I couldn't care less about what happens to them financially or otherwise, they've also managed to drag Lauren and Marlon into their financial mess, which I'm not happy about. At the beginning of the year, Clark's oversized, customized Pride and Joy truck was repossessed. Pretty embarrassing for him, I'm sure, since it happened at his workplace. This was their breaking point. Without the truck, they have to share a small sedan that Lauren and Marlon loaned them, and they can barely fit their 3 children in it. Financially, they are ruined. They owe at least $150,000, probably more, on high-interest credit cards. They have 0 equity in their house, and they have a couple of personal loans that I'm fairly certain they acquired under false pretenses. They have outstanding loans on their boat, 4-wheelers, and trailers. They also owe a significant amount from defaulting on the truck lease. They hadn't made any payments on their credit cards or loans in months and were behind on their house payments as well. They got out of the lease on Vivian's massive SUV late last year. They were upside down on the lease, so they had to come up with cash to get out of it. They also had to pay an attorney, the fine, and court costs for Clark's trespassing charge at the mountain cabin. On top of that, they owe my middle stepsister Ingrid and her husband Spencer money for bail and their portion of the damages to the property. As I mentioned before, Lauren and Marlon have never been financial experts, but they have generally been responsible. They are retired, their home is paid off, and they live off of their fixed income and pensions. Altogether, they receive more than they spend. Minimal savings, just an emergency fund. It turns out Lauren and Marlon emptied out that fund, cashed out their small retirement account, around $25,000, and gave it to Vivian. That enabled her to catch up on the home loan payment and cover the negative equity on her car lease. But now, literally every bit of savings my step-parents possessed is gone. Plus, Lauren and Marlon have been paying for their groceries for several months and continue to pay the insurance on the car they loaned Vivian. According to Marlon, Vivian pressured Lauren for weeks to get her to hand over the money. They had been working on both Lauren and Marlon simultaneously for a while, but Marlon flat out refused every time. Eventually, Lauren succumbed. She was worried that Vivian would have to move to a shabby apartment in some desolate town, and that the children would be barefoot and starving.
Marlon is furious about this, and to say there's significant tension between them right now is an understatement, but they will be fine. I was pretty disappointed when Lauren and Marlon told me all this, but I wasn't surprised. It sucks that they emptied out their savings to help, but I kind of understand it. The way the bankruptcy laws work in my state, by getting caught up on the home loan, Vivian should be able to keep the house. I tried very hard not to vocalize how I felt about this and my stepsister. I mostly succeeded. Honestly, I'm way more ticked off about this than I should be. The worst part for me is that Vivian and Clark could now contact Audrey and me without any real fear of repercussions. The only penalty the no contact agreement has is that if they violate it, I can sue them for the money they made from renting out the vacation house and related damages. Since they filed for bankruptcy, that claim is now essentially meaningless for them. I'm hoping they'll leave me alone, but who knows. Lauren and Marlon also told me that Ingrid and Spencer have hit a rough patch, and that Spencer is not currently living with her and the kids. Just a guess, but I imagine he's had enough of the toxic family dynamic that caused this entire mess. Not directly related, but on a brighter note, I've spent 2 weekends at the mountain house since the start of the year, once with Audrey and once alone. Both times there was a lot of snow. It was incredibly beautiful and relaxing, very therapeutic. The place also has reliable internet service now, which is a welcome addition. Plus, knowing that I can count on Jimmy, the property manager, to keep the place in shape and ready for me to visit, and to help if I get snowed in, eliminates most of the stress of owning it. Lauren and Marlon have used it a few times as well, and get along great with Jimmy. There have been a fair number of requests for an update, and considering it's approaching the 1-year anniversary of the pond incident, I thought I'd post one. Lauren and Marlon eventually worked through Lauren giving Vivian her retirement account and their emergency fund. Altogether, Lauren gave her $45,000, according to Marlon. Once Lauren realized how severely she'd been manipulated, she became as angry and upset as Marlon had ever seen her. I think she had a moment of clarity. She and Marlon ended up calling my stepsisters on a 3-way call, and according to Marlon, it went south very quickly. The sisters were using manipulative language and gaslighting them. Lauren lost her temper and ended up ripping into them hard. There were many tears, and eventually both stepsisters hung up. Lauren's core desire was just for both stepsisters to acknowledge that they'd put them in a perilous financial situation. A typical family blow-up, I suppose, but not the kind of thing that usually happens in my family. The next morning, Marlon called Vivian and informed her he would be picking up the car they loaned her. She tried to argue, but he told her it was not open for discussion. He got a neighbor friend to take him to her house as soon as he hung up and drove the car home without speaking to her. Vivian called and yelled at him, saying lots of cruel things, which of course hurt him. But at least they have the car back. Marlon also told me something that left me completely dumbfounded. For the last 17 years, they had been giving both stepsisters a grocery allowance of up to $500 a month. What the heck? I thought I had a fairly good grasp of where their money was going, but clearly I was wrong. This began back when I was attending postgraduate school and living at home. My stepsisters asked for the money because they felt it wasn't fair that I was living at home rent-free, and then it just never stopped. In any case, Lauren and Marlon cut them off. Unsurprisingly, my stepsisters were not happy about it. Who on earth gets an allowance from their parents when they're in their 40s? Because of all this, Lauren and Marlon and the stepsisters quit talking for a while. I don't know if they've resolved everything, but they appear to be on speaking terms again, though Lauren and Marlon aren't having them or the children over. I'm in don't ask, don't tell mode. It's their business. Lauren and Marlon are using the vacation home quite regularly. Currently, they're there for a 2-week stay and will probably extend it to 3. Unfortunately, Audrey and I haven't spent any time there lately, other than I have made a couple of day trips to check on the place and drop off some supplies. The property manager I hired, Jimmy, is still taking excellent care of the place. Side notes, Ingrid told Lauren that Vivian had been making over $7,000 a month renting the house out, and that it had been going on for nearly 3 years. I'm pretty certain she didn't declare the income, so that's like grossing $90,000 to $100,000 a year off my property. I will forever find that shocking. Vivian and Clark still have their house. My attorney checked up on their bankruptcy case. The court converted it from Chapter 7 to Chapter 13, which I believe means they have to pay back a lot more of their debts. Ingrid and Spencer are still separated. I don't know if Spencer has had any issues with his government clearance because of breaking into the house. I do know he's still with the same large defense company. At Lauren and Marlon's request, I've been working on putting their house into a trust. They want me to manage their affairs as they get older and keep the house safe for my stepsisters. I'm working with an attorney, but it's not finalized yet. Lauren and Marlon have asked me to be the trustee and have also given me full power of attorney.
The best part about the last few months is that my stepsisters and brothers-in-law have left me alone and have stayed away from the vacation home. Audrey and I are genuinely happy to be back to our normal lives. Hope everyone else's lives are going great. Some folks have asked for an update, so here you go. In August, my attorney informed me that he'd received a letter from my middle brother-in-law, Spencer. This was the first contact from any of my stepsisters or their husbands since they'd been arrested. It was a long letter containing a sincere apology and a lot of information he thought I should know. The biggest revelation was that he and Ingrid are divorced, not just separated. He moved out and filed for divorce immediately after I made the settlement agreement. He and Ingrid kept it quiet until it was finalized. Their house sold in June, and she has since moved into an apartment. Spencer explained that being arrested last year, along with Clark, for breaking into the vacation house could have cost him his job and ruined his career, which became a huge moment of clarity for him. He shared that the dynamic between the four of them, the stepsisters, him, and Clark, had become completely toxic. He said they were all borderline alcoholics or worse, and he desperately needed to escape that environment. He no longer speaks to Vivian or Clark. He also asked if he, Marlon, and I could meet to have an extended conversation, as there were things he wanted to discuss in person. Frankly, I wasn't enthusiastic about it, but Audrey thought it was worth considering. I asked Marlon if he was interested. He was, so I relayed a response to my now ex-brother-in-law through my attorney, and we met over lunch. We talked for over 2 hours. It was exhausting. Ex-brother-in-law looked better than I'd seen him in, well, ever. He has quit drinking, is in therapy, has lost a lot of weight, and looks fit. He was apologetic about all the nonsense he'd been involved in, and apologized to Marlon for hiding the divorce. He told them therapy is genuinely helping him. He asked me if the $6,000 he'd sent covered all the damage to the vacation house. I told him it had, and thanked him for speaking with the county prosecutor. He mentioned he's seriously considering transferring to a new project that would have him living overseas for the next few years. He said he really needs to reset his life, but is trying to balance that against being present for his kids. Ex-brother-in-law also dropped what, for me, was quite the shocking moment. Apparently, my stepsisters have hated me since before I was born, but have always hidden it from the rest of us. They preferred things better when it was just the two of them. He said that when they drank, which was every time they were together, my stepsisters would often complain about me being the favorite child. They claimed Lauren and Marlon gave me more opportunities than they had, and that my success was entirely due to that favoritism. They genuinely believed I didn't deserve my accomplishments. None of this made any sense to me or Marlon. All three of us attended the same public schools, worked part-time jobs, etc. Lauren and Marlon paid for 100% of their college tuition, not mine, because I received a full scholarship. I was pretty stunned by this, but Marlon was literally shaking. Eventually, Marlon said he had no idea they felt that way as children, and that he and Lauren had never favored any of them. He is still struggling to process this. Personally, I'm embarrassed that I was clueless about it all my life, but it certainly explains a lot of the past behavior. Ex-brother-in-law warned me that my stepsisters and the remaining brother-in-law, Clark, plan to launch a full-scale effort to alienate Lauren and Marlon from Audrey and me, and they also intend to withhold the grandchildren from Lauren and Marlon as leverage. He said they are still 1,000% convinced that Lauren and Marlon are sitting on a ton of secret money and they want some of it immediately. They believe I would prevent Lauren and Marlon from giving them anything. That made Marlon laugh, because he and Lauren simply don't have any real money, other than their house, of course. Ex-brother-in-law also admitted that he and Ingrid had rented out the vacation house a total of 6 times over the years. He offered to pay me what they had made, but I declined and told him it was in the past. He also shared that Vivian and Clark had never declared the rental income to the IRS. He did because he didn't want to get into trouble. Both Marlon and I spoke with ex-brother-in-law separately for a few minutes. I don't know what they discussed. I thanked him for his apology and for making things right financially, and I also wished him well and told him I'd be open to talking again in the future. That said, I don't think it's likely to happen. I probably could have been more forgiving, but I think he appreciated my honesty about how all this has negatively affected Audrey and May. There was more, but it's less important, and this is already far too long. After ex-brother-in-law left, I asked Marlon if he, Lauren, and I could sit down to talk about everything. I didn't mean immediately, but that's how he took it. He called Lauren to let her know I was coming over, so I rolled with it. Lauren was pretty hurt by my stepsister's plans to ruin her and Marlon's relationship with Audrey and me, and to use the grandchildren as pawns. She cried a lot and wanted to confront them immediately, but Marlon convinced her to hold off for now. Lauren was also stunned by the idea that I was supposedly the favorite child. She felt they were actually stricter with me since I had a mandatory curfew and my stepsisters didn't. To be honest, I barely remember that. It was 25 years ago. A couple of side notes. Ingrid eventually told Lauren and Marlon about her divorce. She's currently living off child support and her share of the home sale. Supposedly, she's trying to find a job. Lauren and Marlon have gone low contact with both stepsisters. I have no idea how permanent that will be, but Lauren seems completely done with them for the foreseeable future. Lauren and Marlon had been spending a lot of time at the mountain house, and were up there for over a month at one point. Ex-brother-in-law found my online posts. He's not thrilled about them, but feels they're mostly accurate, though obviously slanted toward my point of view. He disagreed with my characterization of him as boring, but added that he finds me boring too. I could live with that. My worlds don't overlap much, except for Ingrid. They got the trust set up for Lauren and Marlon's house, and I'm the trustee. All of this has been emotionally draining for me. I decided to start seeing a therapist again. I've seen one in the past for stress-related issues. I've been going for a while now, and it's definitely helpful. My therapist believes my decision to stay no contact with my step-siblings is healthy for now, but encourages me to keep an open mind for the future. Merry Christmas to you all.
And that's it. That is the end of this whole exhausting nightmare. For the first time in almost a year, I can actually look at the cabin keys without a knot forming in my stomach. Writing all of this down has honestly been therapeutic, and seeing that signed agreement, it felt like finally putting a 1,000-pound backpack down. I am absolutely fine with never speaking to them again. I'm moving forward with a clean slate, knowing I fought for what was right, and I won my peace back. If you've stuck with this whole story, thank you. You have no idea how much the comments and support have meant to me, especially when I felt completely alone in this mess. So, here's my question for all of you who have been through something similar. What was the single greatest lesson you learned about boundaries or self-protection when dealing with your own family drama? Tell me in the comments below. Hit that like button if you're glad I finally got justice, and I'll see you in the next one.